Tallinn University, and I'm glad to be here. I wish I could see more people in front of me, but the situation is like this and I can't do anything about it. So yeah, my topic sounds quite philosophical, yeah, because I have a background in philosophy. I was studying in Lithuania. I was also studying abroad in Iceland, Finland, Poland. So I have quite an international experience. Yeah, now I'm based in Tallinn, like for more or less 2 years. Yeah, probably I don't plan to return to Lithuania, but who knows. Okay, and I have to say that at the secondary school I was studying compulsory arts, like from the 1st to 10th grade. And I like had whole day supposed to be like artistic day at my secondary art school. We had like painting, graphics, design studies, and I met very nice teachers there who were famous artists from my hometown, Panevėžys. And if any of you heard, we had like in Panevėžys very famous symposiums of ceramics and all other materials. So yeah, it's quite famous. I'm not yet quite sure whether they still happen today. Yeah, but we had like to go there and make descriptions of the things we saw at the gallery. Yeah, so yeah, I guess my interest in art comes from these times. Then I was a school pupil. Yeah. And I guess I wouldn't be a philosopher if I wouldn't talk about the origins. Where do things come from? And one thing, you know, is art. We are quite interested, like philosophers and philosophers of art generally ask, where does the art come from? What's the source? Like, does it come from the outer world, or like we are born already artists? So yeah, this is the question. And I would like Googling and searching what is art. No, yeah, searching through the internet much of the stuff we need them. And there is a famous musicologist and philosopher, Peter Sandy, and he says in his book of the aesthetic supermarket that art became nowadays some kind of like massive experience, art to sold in galleries, and it's really hard to meet like some authentic original art, because everyone can be an artist, because we have all these technological devices that help us to make art. And the classical definition of art is like, according to Encyclopedia Britannica, from the 17th century on, the fine art meant forms of art developed primarily for aesthetics, distinguishing them from the applied arts that also have to serve some practical function. And traditionally, the five main arts were painting, sculpture, architecture, music, and poetry, with minor arts including drama and dance. Today, the fine arts commonly include additional forms such as film, photography, conceptual art, and printmaking. And yeah, indeed, some people, just thanks to their technological device, can make pictures and I say, oh, it's my art, and I can share it to anyone who sees it. So basically, the fine arts, as it was in the classical form, was quite hard to find now, and we find it in galleries, and that's why we are here today, I guess. So yeah, and the definition of fine arts like developed and has changed. And one of my most recent definitions of fine art is it's like a visual art considered to have been created primarily for aesthetic and intellectual purposes, and it's judged by its meaningfulness, Specifically, the fine arts today as well can be painting, sculpture, drawing, watercolor, graphics, architecture, and like computer art as well can be considered today as the fine art already. Yeah, and any ideas what is fine arts to you?
What a group of especially educated people define or support to be fine arts, usually provide it in a gallery, that's fine arts.
Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes, strangely enough, that some fine arts is demonstrated in the huge shopping malls. I think in Tallinn, the orchestras has some kind of exhibitions time to time in the middle of the factory. So yeah, Peter Sandy tells about that aesthetics became just one of the supermarkets. Okay. It now might seem a bit boring, but we can turn for some time to Heidegger. I would love to show some aspects of Heidegger and how he views art. And probably you know a lot about Heidegger. Do you know? Yeah, so it may seem a bit boring, but why not? Yeah, it's about the origins not only of art but of philosophy. Have you ever seen these documentaries, by the way, Human of the Human by BBC? Yeah, you did, and they're like have the documentaries, and I guess you may see it because it has on Nietzsche and Sartre as well, and it's very great to see when you have time. Yeah, so let's watch for some time.
Are you planning to show the food?
Huh? Can you hear, by the way? Is it good sound? Do we have speakers? I will try to improvise. Is it better?
Die Aufgabe, die dem Denken gestellt ist heute, wie ich es verstehe, ist in einer Weise neu, dass es eine ganz neue Methode des Denkens verlangt. Dieses Denken ist in der Sache sehr viel einfacher als die Philosophie, aber im Vollzug sehr viel schwieriger und verlangt eine neue Sorgfalt der Sprache.
The renowned philosopher Martin Heidegger lived for the whole of his life in the Black Forest area of southern Germany. He looked, talked, and often acted like a typical German farmer, but he thought like nobody else alive.
For moments one reads Heidegger, life is different afterwards. Now there are lots of reasons why that's the case, but it has a lot to do with the power of the argument and its novelty. I can't imagine ever having thought that before, Finn. It just changes the way you view philosophy.
As you get into it, it can become indispensable to one's own feeling of how thinking gets itself done. And to those who say, look, this isn't philosophy, I say, fine, I'm not telling instant with a supermarket label, call it what you will. Are you able to cope? Are you able to live with its completely new, radical grasp on the world?
Okay, one more expert.
More critical commentary.
And well, basically, I was not that familiar with the Heidegger. Heidegger turned the Western philosophy upside down and just started to ask, like, how something is, how something exists at all. And it's a very basic question that was bothering Heidegger through mostly all of his philosophy. And nonetheless, there is an interesting book. I actually don't recall who wrote that book, but there is the hidden sources of Heidegger, saying that Heidegger stole most of his philosophy from like Eastern philosophy, like Buddhism and Nishida, and some other philosophers, like Japanese philosophers especially, with whom he was quite familiar personally with. Yeah, let's go further. This is the son of Heidegger. Yeah, it talks about the Heidegger's hut in the mountains in Daunabel, in Western Germany. Yeah.
Topflager had a profound effect on Heidegger's personality.
Is he not suicidal?
His long stays there appear to have reinforced his sense of himself as a true son of the Black Forest. And before long, he began to cultivate a somewhat eccentric artistic image.
Heidegger's physique early on was a kind of invention of self. The insistence on peasant style clothes, the Black Forest way of speaking, chopping his own wood, his lonely hut high up in the hills at Loengusari. Nothing, I think, would have alerted one to the immensity of the work and of the thought.
Hans-Jürgen Gadamer was one of the few people outside the philosopher's immediate family to have visited him at the hut. He vividly recalls Heidegger's curious manner and appearance, but he also remembers something else.
Mir so ein bisschen wie so, naja, so halbe Monte oder sowas ausnahmefällt oder sowas. Oh, da sah ich, da war Fantasie. Nur einen ganz anderen Grad, als wie etwa der Husserl oder den anderen großen Namen, Natop, die ich so kannte.
During the early 1920s, having broken decisively with the Catholic Church, Heidegger also began to distance himself from his mentor, Edmund Husserl. Whereas Husserl was intent on illuminating the innermost workings of the mind, Heidegger became convinced that what thinkers like himself should really be addressing was the ordinary person's everyday experience of the world. This conviction led him to write what is generally regarded as his masterpiece, the dense, evocative, strangely worded text known as Sein und Zeit, or to use its English title, Being and Time.
This work is a tour de force of philosophical writing. One can't help in reading it to be simply amazed and astounded. It also, viewed historically, was the moment in which phenomenology, that which hitherto had been the dominant philosophical mode of thinking, was called into question, but called into question in such a radical way that it became almost impossible to go back to phenomenology and continue with it.
At the heart of Being and Time, and therefore of Heidegger's philosophy as a whole, is one deceptively simple question. What is really meant by the verb to be? We all think we understand what we mean when we say that someone or something is. But do we? Or are we, as Heidegger thought, letting the familiarity of the word itself blind us to what is really the greatest mystery of all?
Do we, in our time, have an answer to the question of what we really mean by the word being? Not at all. But are we nowadays even perplexed at our inability to understand the expression being? Not at all. Our aim in the following treatise is to work out the question of the meaning of being, and to do so concretely. Our provisional aim is the interpretation of time as the possible horizon for any understanding whatsoever of being.
Immanuel Kant, no small figure, he had said that space and time were equally important. They were the way we organized our world. The very young Heidegger, never forget, he's writing this as a very, very young man, says not at all. Space is an almost insignificant category. Time is the mystery.
Time and human existence are inextricably linked, according to Heidegger. Our being, he says, is really a process of becoming. And this key insight leads him to reject the idea that there is such a thing as a fixed human essence.
Heidegger's major contribution in Being and Time is to show how the old Aristotelian essence of man as the rational animal is, in effect, an abstraction, because what comes first is man's own existence, and existence for Heidegger is nothing but this stretching, whereby we are constantly projecting ourselves into the future, always expecting things, always hoping things.
Heidegger is a man who first wanted to investigate how practical action shows that we're pulled ahead of ourselves into purposes that we're trying to fulfill, into tasks that we're working on. Think of a farmer in the Black Forest, for example, making a barrel. This is someone who has a future task that he's trying to fulfill, and he has a logic operating there that shows that the human being is actually extended ahead of himself. The ahead is where we really live, what we desire to do, what we anticipate, what we want this wood to turn out to be.
People who live and work in traditional rural communities have an instinctive grasp of their own humanity, according to Heidegger. They are fully absorbed in and connected to the world, but they are also a clear minority of the human race. Heidegger argues that most of us, especially those who live in big modern cities, tend to lose touch with our individuality. Forced to conform to patterns of mass behavior, we experience strong feelings of anxiety, he says, and end up leading what he calls inauthentic lives.
Most of us live what he called a life of one. One is one does this, one thinks that, one moves in this way. And he's saying to you, no, the I is not one. And this was in the 1920s sheer breathtaking prophecy before the great mass market detergents of standardized life and death which has swept over us. The consumerism even of our death, they don't belong to us anymore. And he gave the great warning. He said, as this soap powder spreads over the planet, over the universe, it will be almost impossible for you to be you and not just one.
And now the last piece.
Colleague of Heidegger's, the respected philosopher Karl Jaspers, asked him what course of action he would recommend. Jaspers replied that
Heidegger hat selbst ja einen Biografen
gesagt, er sei zusammengebrochen.
Yeah, you probably all know that Heidegger's involvement with Nazism, and yeah, probably you have heard this as well. Heidegger's involvement with Nazism and basically putting away Edmund Husserl, his mentor, away from the university. And strangely enough, Heidegger never took his boss back and never said any excuses because of that. Probably Heidegger thought that Nazism is the philosophy that has something to do with his own philosophy, and thinking that the Germans are some authentic nation having an authentic goal in their kind of nationhood, and probably that's why Heidegger never took his words back and never said any apologies about his Nazistic past. You can, by the way, see it all in YouTube. They're interesting.
Ist aber in einer Weise da, die nicht haltbar ist. Er ist in der Tat zusammengebrochen, er war suizidgefährdet.
Some committee was investigating all these issues.
Aufgeteilt antreten können mit Hilfe seines väterlichen Freundes, des Erzbischofs Konrad Gröber aus Maastricht, der ja für ihn wichtig gewesen ist von Anfang an, konnte er dort in einem Sanatorium wieder geheilt werden.
Heidegger was now at his lowest ebb, and yet within a few years he would stage a remarkable recovery. Almost as soon as the war ended, he began to be cited as a key intellectual influence by several up-and-coming philosophers, most notably Jean-Paul Sartre, whose book Being and Nothingness was conceived as a companion piece to Heidegger's Being and Time. When Heidegger resumed teaching again in the early 50s, the support of Sartre and other existentialist thinkers helped to re-establish him as a major academic star.
Es ist die Zeit, in der wir wohl Deutschland allgemein als restaurative Zeit rechnen müssen. In dieser Zeit kommt er wie der Vogel aus der Asche, wie Phönix aus der Asche zu neuem Leben und zu neuer Anerkennung, ja, zu einer unerwarteten, großen Anerkennung international. Das ist ein Wunder, so wie das deutsche Wirtschaftswunder ein Wunder sein mag, vielleicht.
The one person, other than Sartre, who did most.
So yeah, you can finish watching this on your own behalf. And now let's return to Heidegger again. Yeah, now Heidegger, I gathered some pictures, and this is the top of it. Heidegger wrote most of his writings. And I guess this is the surrounding philosophy and arts may come from. Yeah, so yeah. So where does this inspiration come from? Probably. And then I now see all of these paintings here, and it's their weird consciousness. I didn't have time to check who's the author of these paintings here on the walls. Do you know?
One young guy who can see.
Yeah, well, anyhow. Yeah, so I don't know what can be the inspiration for these paintings, some kind of own experiences, the creativity crisis that I see, like, for example, the second painting, and what's going on, and where does our creativity and where does our art come from, and is this only word, or what's going on with us? And we get inspired when we write a poem or make a painting, it's kind of mysterious questions. Some neuroscientists probably would explain that, like there's some movement of the brain cells, and some guys from some other camp would say, well, it just there is, we just get inspired and do things. Yeah. It's the same surroundings. I have never been there, unfortunately, but I hope I will go there someday myself to see all these places. Yeah. Okay, a bit more theory now. And have you heard of Karsten Harris? He wrote like very nice commentary on art matters, a critical commentary on Heidegger's The Origin of the Work of Art. And he quotes the story there, and he tells that technology, instead of helping us to live more fully human lives, might become second nature in a way that it can rob us of our humanity. He thinks that Heidegger's The Origin of the Artwork communicates a similar concern. What concerns Heidegger is finally not so much art, but the understanding of being, that is the presupposition of our science and technology, and thus our modern culture. Basically, how technologies change our understanding of being, what happens with our thinking today when we have so many devices to use. And that's why Heidegger turns to art to recall us to a more original, more archaic understanding of being. It was Heidegger's worry that both with art and technology, his nostalgic celebration of the peasant woman, that reminds me of the story that was told some millennia ago by a Chinese philosopher, Zhuang Tzu. And I will read this story because it puts all of my lecture to the very nice summary, let's say. And the story goes as follows. Zhu Kung traveled south to the ancient states in the Yangtze Valley, and on his way back from China, as he passed along the south bank of the Han River, he saw an old man preparing his fields for planting. He had hollowed out an opening by which he entered the well, and from which he emerged, lodging a pitcher, which he carried out to the water fields. Grunting and puffing, he used a great deal of energy and produced very little result. You know this thing that the pitcher, there's a water that can take the water from the So, grunting and puffing, he used up a great deal of energy and produced a very little result. There is a machine for this sort of a thing, said Zhu Kung. In one day it can water hundreds of fields, demanding very little effort and producing excellent results. Would you like one? The gardener raised his head and looked at Zhu Kung. How does it work? He asked. It's a contraption made by shaping a piece of wood. The back end is heavy and the front end is light, and it races with water as though it were pouring it out, so fast that it seems to boil right over. It's called a well sweep. The gardener flushed with anger and then said with a laughter, I have heard my teacher say, there are machines, there are bound to be machine wars. There are machine wars, there are bound to be the machine hearts. If a machine heart in your breast, you have spoiled what was pure and simple. And without the pure and simple, the life of the spirit knows no rest. Then the life of the spirit knows no rest. The life will cease to lift and nurture you up. It's not that I don't want your machine. I wouldn't be ashamed to use it. Yeah, it's quite a nice story, and I'm quite fascinated by it. And the German physicists and the key creators of quantum mechanics, Werner Heisenberg, in the beginning of the 19th century, says that this story had not lost all its relevance. He says that the restlessness of the spirit, he suggested, is perhaps one of the most fitting descriptions we can give of the state of human beings in our present times. We should consider the way such restlessness is related to that of boredom of Heidegger. And boredom is considered by Heidegger as the fundamental mood of our age, and the devices, the triggers we need to brighten up our being, not to be bored. And indeed, today's world makes it impossible for us not to have a machine words. And the old gardener was probably right. There are machine words, there are bound to be the machine hearts. And yeah, this is the background of the critical commentary, and Heidegger's inquiry into the origin of the old work of art can perhaps help to prevent the reason that rules the world of machines from ruling us as human beings too. Yeah, and probably Heidegger tries to prevent our hearts transforming into machines, and he wants us to have like more critical understanding what's going on. Yeah, and it's a very old story indeed, and it's reflecting a very different way of life in China back then. But as Heisenberg observes further, and today technology and the machine has spread over the world to an extent of which the Chinese farmer probably couldn't have no idea. But having in mind this development of our age, even 2000 years later, the most beautiful works of art were still being created, and the simplicity of the soul. And a philosopher tries to speak about that simplicity of the soul and the creativity of the one. And isn't Heisenberg not right? Mustn't we learn the wisdom of this Chinese peasant? Shouldn't we like get the wisdom of this gardener, that we not necessarily need machines to make the art and make our life happy? And yeah, the fact is that Heisenberg thinks that it's important for us to listen to what the story suggests. The more deeply we understand the presuppositions of the scientific world, and the more we recognize that it would be responsible not to affirm technology, the more difficult it becomes to simply dismiss the older gardener's concerns. Nor should we take comfort in and give no further thought to the millennia and all the coexistence of simplicity of thought and machine technology. And our task as human beings is to do justice both to the legitimacy of technology and to the limits of technology. Art matters because it can open windows in the house of metaphysics, and technology has both. And art matters because it can open windows to an outside, work for which we lack adequate words. Now, let's meet the tribes. Yeah, this is Jimmy Nelson, talks at TEDx at Amsterdam. He is a famous photographer and he has a very nice project. He goes to many different tribes in many regions of the world, and you can see his journey maps here. Yeah, basically you can see where he has gone, and he's been to like 13 journeys, mostly in Asia, and yeah, and you can see not many tribes actually let him into their daily lives, but you can just maybe I can open some of the most weirdest. And basically he tries to depict the authentic life the tribe lives in, and there are not so many of the people who remaining there in these old tribes. So yeah, and you can see the photos, yeah, how they live, and it's very good quality and very. Because all this pollution, globalization, he's afraid we touch these tribes that they will just vanish away from the world. All this clothing, and we can go as well to Indonesia and yeah. As he tells that the journey is like view on life upside down, because he saw that many of these tribes are on the way to extinction, and so yeah, he tried to make the last grasp of where they live in. Some of the tribes even don't know what's internet, and all of these weird mosques, and yeah, it's that only 3 pictures because the tribes do not want to be photographed. And now let's see some videos. Well, you can, it's like before they pass away, before you can see yourself some other tribes. Yeah. And now let me show you another videos.
And on that journey, something happened, something very profound. It went far beyond photography. I started to learn lessons, and 3 of those lessons I'd like to share with you today. The first lesson, I was in the Rift Valley, and far northern Kenya, just near the edge of Lake Turkana. And I'd like to show you a picture and ask you a question. What do you see here? I see 3 fantastic, beautiful, elegant, tall people standing proudly in a landscape overlooking a valley. Often people say, they're women. And I say, well, look closer. They're men. They're not only men, they're warriors. They're Samburu warriors. And next to that, they can kill lions with their bare hands. When lions attack their camels, they go out and they kill them. So here you are, with these fantastically beautiful, tall, elegant, effeminate. They spend half the day running around looking in mirrors, playing with their beads and their hair and their skirts. But on some days they go out and kill lions with their bare hands. So what am I trying to say? Look closer. Look closer. We in the developed world are very comfortable with our prejudices and with our judgments. Look closer, because you never know what's around the corner. Often things can be very different than they seem to be. The second lesson was one of choice. I'm now in Chukotka. I didn't know where it was either. It's in far northeastern Russia and Siberia. It's at the very end of the planet. And I'm looking for the Chukchi. The Chukchi are the last Russian Eskimos. So we arrived, we rented a tank, we got a guide, a Chukchi guide, and we said, when do we find them? When do we find them? I said, I don't know. It'll take a while, if we find them at all. I'll sit on the roof, it's minus 50 degrees centigrade, and we're going to follow the reindeer droppings. I mean, off we go. Weeks and weeks later, literally, often with the cold coming in, minus 50 degrees outside, it was invariably minus 40 inside, we eventually found them. It was the most extraordinary experience. I've never experienced anything like that in my life, to be at the end of the world and eventually find the world's last people. There they were, the Yorangas, these fantastic tents in the distance, made out of reindeer skins. We got out of the tank, and these people enveloped us. They brought us in, and within seconds, we were part of their community. No names, no where, no what, no why. You're one of us, and we're going to look after you, because it's cold and you will die if you don't listen to us. After a week, we started a conversation. I turned to them and I said, why are you living here? How did it come to be that you're living here at the end of the world? And they said, we chose. We chose to be here. And I said, but how can you choose to be here? And he said, well, not so long ago, we were taken to a city and given an apartment block. And there we sat, and there we drank, and there we watched television. And we became very, very sad. We started not seeing our children, not seeing our old people, and we decided we were going to change. We were going to go back to where we came from. Because there we were happy. There we could feel how we were, and here we couldn't. So what am I trying to say? Even at the edge of the world, if you dare feel yourself, if you dare feel the environment you live in, if you dare feel one another, you know what will make you happy, and you have a choice, like these people did. And the last lesson I'd like to share with you is in northwestern Mongolia, in the Altai Mountains, with these Hollywood heroes of mine, the Kazakh warriors, with these fantastic eagles with 5-meter wingspans, traveling across these mountains. And I had, for years, I've dreamed of making pictures of these people. So off we went on another one of my little Jimmy exhibitions, started climbing the mountain, and there we're standing with this cinematographic vista behind me with these 3 proud warriors. I'm getting excited, it's early in the morning, I stupidly, again, I still haven't learned my lesson, take off my gloves and I go for my old camera. My fingers freeze to it. In panic, I rip them off and I rip these fingers. I'm in pain. I'm in so much pain I started to cry. I started to cry because I was emotionally upset, I was physically absolutely exhausted, and I couldn't feel my fingers anymore. And there before me was this image I'd spent my whole life wanting to make, and I couldn't make that picture. So I was stressed in the most extreme way. And I turned around, and behind me were 2 women who'd followed us up the mountain. And one of them beckoned me over, and I sort of stumbled over like a spoiled child, screaming, oh, my fingers, my fingers. She opened her jacket, and she grabbed me, and she hugged me. And the other woman came from behind, and they rocked me like a baby. And they rocked me to and fro and sang me a song. To say I started walking down the mountain, I got my picture, which you've just seen, selfish as always. And it was only then when I realized that these people, this is an Islamic culture. Traditional Islamic culture. These people broke down all their values, all their culture, to help me. So by being vulnerable, by letting go, by being fallible, you can connect with people on any level. So what am I trying to say? I've given you 3 lessons of experiences I've had whilst making these photographs. First, the lesson is of judgment. Be careful when you look and judge somebody, because it's often different. The second is choice. We all have a choice, no matter what it is. And thirdly, I genuinely believe by being truly vulnerable, by truly feeling who you are and letting go, wherever you are on the planet, and people often ask me, how on earth do you communicate with these people? But that's by truly becoming naked in a metaphorical way. Don't get me wrong. You can communicate and get what you've done. So what am I trying to say? With these lessons, we have to wake up, yeah? We have to start documenting these cultures very, 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 very quickly, because they're going to disappear. And as soon as they disappear, we will lose something which is very, very, very important to us. It's our authenticity. It's where we came from. It's our origins. And they will change. They will evolve. So we can't stop them. But we have to start a dialogue. We have to start a new conversation in how to access the information, what we can teach them and what they can teach us. So how I would like to do that is revisit them with a book myself and my team have just made. I'd like to present it to them and show them why I was there, why I was running around screaming like a baby without gloves on, why I was peeing my pants, why I was making them into the icons which I hope they now see. And with that, a message in what they can learn from us, in my opinion, in cultural and anthropological mistakes we've made, and vice versa. What can we learn from you in your way, and your purity, and your authenticity, and your beauty? And by doing that, with this dialogue, I want to readdress a balance which I feel we have lost. With this project of mine, Reform, they pass away. Thank you very much for listening.
Yeah, going along, going further, where is how much time do I still have? Yeah, and this is the well sweep I was talking about. And do you still have these kind of well sweeps in Estonia? Not anymore? We're just going to take out the water?
I don't think so.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's not anymore. I guess, I mean, in Lithuania, in some very old gardens, you can still see it. But they're either broken or they don't work away, and because everyone now has this canalization and water flowing through pipes. So kind of, you know, there's no these things anymore. And yeah, and this is a thing, you know, you can still make it, but what about the people? What about the tribes? And many authentic tribes, they just can vanish away without noticing, and since people can make things, but we cannot make the authentic people. So, and yeah, art paintings, you know, can be installed in public places, churches, you know, everywhere, but people cannot. People can vanish away. Our life is towards death, how sad it sounds. Yeah, but artworks are eternal. And artwork show the untouched actuality and untouched reality of a painter and some message he tries to communicate. And the picture hangs on the wall like a riffle or a hat, and a painting, for example, the one of the Van Gogh that presents a pair of the peasant's shoes, travels from one exhibition to another, showing the lived world of some peasant. Works of art are shipped now like coal from one river to another. And during the First World War, the famous units of the Friedrich Hölderlin were packed in the soldiers' packs together with the cleaning gear, to show that poetry can, you know, raise your spirit up when the war happens. And Beethoven's quartets lie now in the storerooms of the publishing houses like potatoes in a cellar. We don't value what we have anymore. Yeah, and to keep on going on the what work of art is it a thing made, or is it something that communicates as a message? Isn't an artwork just an allegory, an expression of truth, or by using some symbolic figures about the human existence? And indeed, the work of art makes public something other than it is itself. The artwork manifests something other. If in the work of art something other is brought together with the thing that is made, to bring things together in Greek is symboline. The artwork is basically a symbol. And the interesting to see that the symboline comes from the ancient Greek and literally means to put together. And the term is the roof of the symbolic, and it designates the action of uniting, joining together, converging. The opposite of symbolic is diabolic, to throw off art, which has to do with the forces of separating, parting, and diverging. So, yeah. And as Karsten Harris, the philosopher was looking before, talks, he says that we can only get ourselves ready for the possible coming and hearing of the words and we can only ready ourselves for the possible coming and hearing of the words of artists and poems. And the poets and artists are trying to sing the silent poem of something holy. What's holy and something that's beyond our comprehension. But Heidegger has come to accept that the world establishing work is denied to us by the world we live in. He remains convinced that we still need art in order not to allow this world to become a house without an inside. Let me introduce, have you heard of the Hubert Dreyfus, quite famous Massachusetts philosopher? And he's a professor of philosophy at the University of California, Berkeley, and he's a very well-known scholar of Heidegger. And I'm sorry. According to Dreyfus, the Heidegger's claim is that we now think of ourselves as resources to use ourselves, and according to Dreyfus, Heidegger's claim is that we now think of ourselves as resources to use ourselves and everything else efficiently. As Dreyfus says to his classes, if you ask what are people in the world for, the Christians could have said to serve God, and the Greeks could have said to do something glorious, that people will sing the hymns of you after you do. But what our culture would say, we would probably say, today we want to get most of our possibilities. And that's, comparing to the old times, it's an entirely different picture. Now we think ourselves of the resources to optimize, to use many things efficiently, to consume and etc. And this is indeed funny, because Heidegger tries to oppose that way of thinking. And today people want to do so many things at one time. We want to multitask, and we are presupposed by this world we live today, and it's indeed so hard not to do like a couple of things at a time. And we probably missing something important because we live in a very busy times. And Heidegger thinks that there is a way of being quiet at the center of the mess, so that whatever happens around you, and we can find the focus there. Heidegger had this picture of what he calls Sphinx thinking, which gets translated by a philosopher, Albert Bormann, as focal practices. His favorite example is something like a celebratory meal, which isn't efficient, like eating a TV dinner at the time you want in front of you a program you want to see it on TV. And focal practices is like getting all the people together and doing a lot of work that requires a lot of excellence to prepare the food, and using a white tablecloth and just gathering all things together. And then people feel, if it works, that all the outside things that they normally worry about disappear. And for a while there is a special independent world created. Favorite movie of Dreyfus, Babette's Feast, shows that Mrs. Ramsay gives a dinner in which they come in which people come and just talk about politics and all the daily dealings and businesses and so forth. And of course, particularly the men talk about that. But by the time then the people have enough of wine and they get the main course, they forget that all, and thing becomes what Virginia Woolf calls eternal. And it's clear what Heidegger and Virginia Woolf are reaching for. In Babette's Feast, they say that Babette, who made the feast, is an angel. They can't help but reach for some kind of a religious language. And it's actually something, but we are learning less and less how to have and how to do. And today, more and more of today, everybody becomes just smartphone users while they are having dinner, and they just at the same time watch TV and listens to their iPod. And according to Heidegger, it's probably better life if you can have all these focal practices at one time, and you shouldn't be driven by the by the idea of optimizing and getting most of your possibilities, just being together with yourself and with others. And yeah. And one of these wonderful things, then it happens like family dinner, or just being alone in the woods, or walking alone by the sea. And it's just, in these times you stop wondering, is this useful? Is this helping me to get up most of my possibilities? In a way, you just breathe. Yeah. And the fact is that face-to-face togetherness and intimacy sitting by the table with your loved one is not switchable around or optimizable by any device nor any software. Needless to say that recently words like addicted, obsessed, and dependent have been increasingly used to recognize our relationship with our gadget. Addicted as in dependent on as a habit, unable to do without, says Oxford Dictionary. The epidemic of the overuse of personal computers and the internet and their adverse positive effects are finding a growing voice amongst psychologists, IT professionals, educators, parents, and peers. As the centerpiece of the modern daily practical life for generations XYZ, the mental and social side effects are becoming difficult to ignore. And you know, we all, yeah, it's to see, yeah. You probably all now face these kind of situations in the cities where people in the main squares just do not talk to each other, do not communicate, but they just all are into the internet because others are not that fascinating as the world. They're the virtual world. Yeah, and this is of course yeah. Last but not least, what's time? Do I still have some time? I guess we start a bit later. Yeah. Yeah, so I don't have that much text anymore. So yeah, and the fact is, again, that we shouldn't interpret Heidegger to be suggesting that we all go out and become artists, but rather that we incorporate more of the artist's and poet's vision into our own view of the world. By doing so, we can guard against the dangers of framing and enter into a free, constantly critical, constantly questioning our relationship with the technology that is making new incursions into our lives. And truly so, while various technology has an amazing potential to add value to our daily lives, it also has an ability to distract us from fundamental and beautiful experiences. Having art experience the imparchment thanks to never-ending innovations in the field of science and technology. Lasers can cut the walls, robots can take the care of old people, and nevertheless, computers can make the art that looks better than the fine art. In the late 60s and 70s, the advent of the computers, Hubert Dreyfus in his book, What Computers Still Can Do, explains that human beings are not at all like computers. Humans do not apply abstract, context-free rules to compute how to act when we engage in a school behavior. Instead, Dreyfus argued, the fundamental thing about humans is that we are embodied beings living in a shared world of social practices and equipment. In the end, it's our skillful mastery and our shared practices that not only distinguish us from machines, but allow us to assume meaningful identities. According to Dreyfus, what people are really good at is making and preserving worlds, and then they treat themselves as resources to enhance their possibilities. They are denying their authentic capacity to make and preserve their own authentic worlds. That's yeah. And coming back to the story where I started, and yeah, I've heard my teacher say there are machines, there are bound to be machine words. There are machine words that are bound to be the machine hearts. In his last interview for Der Spiegel, Heidegger said that only God can save us, or some God. And indeed, and the threat that the Third World War will happen is bigger than ever. Only some local gods or some local artists can save us. Thank you. And I would love to show the last video. I have even the video of this.
If I think nature around me is nothing but meaningless stuff waiting to be optimized, then why shouldn't I just put a nice big hotel here, make a lot of money, all the people can see the ocean? The idea that there's something there independently of me is something you have to cultivate and develop a sensitivity to. And I think that's what a poet does. A poet is sort of the paradigmatic instance of the person who's learned a receptivity to things independent of us. So we can all learn that. You don't have to be a poet or an artist, you know. You can be a cook or a carpenter or a soccer player. Life is made most meaningful when you respond to meanings that are independent of you. Right? This is a point that goes back to Kierkegaard. Kierkegaard said that if you think all meaning comes from you, then you can just take it back. You're a king without a castle. Right? You're a sovereign of a land of nothing. There has to be something in the world that pushes back, that has some force over you, or else you'll never experience anything that's really mattering to you.
¿Y por qué las guitarras que no son artesanales son tan malas?
Porque las hace la máquina y la máquina no siente, la máquina no entiende. Entonces, la guitarra está viva siempre, la madera está viva siempre. Y no es lo mismo. Una cómoda, ya no vamos a hablar de una guitarra, vamos a hablar de una cómoda, de un aparador, de una mesa. Cuando la hace la mano del hombre, la comida en esa mesa sabe de otra manera. En un plato que lo haya hecho una máquina. A comer en un plato que está hecho de barro, que viene de la tierra y que lo haya tocado la mano humana. ¿Por qué? Porque hay dedicación. A las cosas se diferencian, la máquina se diferencia del hombre, precisamente del hombre y no la máquina.
There is actually this Manuel Molina, you saw him making guitars. There is a movie about himself making, you know, these things. You probably, you know him, I guess, Manuel Molina, no? He's quite famous flamenco artist. Okay, questions?
I have a question actually. About this position, I understand you talk about art and art forms in some holistic.
Yes.
One or is these two things for you different?
Well, I guess I talk about holistic art.
Art and art forms
really
together.
Yes, as one.
Because I think these two things are different for me.
Okay.
Art and art forms, because all what to talk about these new technologies, and so it's question of art forms, not question of art. Or what to think about this?
You say that I'm like too general in a way, that I want to talk
It's
about art.
unclear, yeah, because for example this very last about this guitar building, it is some made experiment. This same music piece was performed, this same audio. And two visual pictures. One picture, musicians are playing so emotionally, and the other picture, musicians played without emotion, only score. And then it was experiment for professionals. What interpretation is better? Okay, this emotional was better. This same audio, yeah, this same audio, two different video pictures.
Yes.
So it's question of art forms, not of art, I think.
Yeah,
it can be also here. It is some kind of mystification or comparing of things what are not comparable. What to think?
Yeah, actually, personally, I don't want to put everything to the right shelves and this thing is this and this is that and this belongs to this place. I want to leave the question open and for the discussion because, well, you can open Wikipedia and see this is this and that's it. And yeah.
But what you make your doctoral, yeah? I understand.
No, I'm just first year doctoral student, so I'm on the way.
Well, I mean, the question indeed was that you're saying that he thinks that there is art, some kind of more objective thing, and then there are forms in which this more objective art, like in case of the musicians playing in different ways, but something was similar. It was like the music.
Music was similar, and interpretation was similar, but two different videos. It is very, very easy to make montage. Two different videos with the same, absolutely the same audio.
Okay.
You understand?
Yeah.
And two different meanings for professional musicians who are seeing this video with the same audio.
Yeah, he would say that there is something objective art, while there could be different forms. So as I understand him, it would be like, it doesn't matter when you make it on the iPhone or when you sort of see the authentic, the authentic gypsy, or correctly say the Roma person playing it. It's a matter of how you form it. It's still art somehow, separated from how you perform it. And you would want to deny that. You would want to say that art is really, as you said, some very authentic lived life, a skillfully lived life, like a skillless thing. And then art is, like I said, a symbiosis, a bringing together. We went back to the Greek. So you would say that art is somehow essentially connected to one form, and this form is the skillful life then that is symbolically played in this painting or music. So there is no art without this lived, true, skillful life.
I guess
that Heidegger was talking about. That was the tribe, that was the Heidegger's peasant way of life. Numerous ways of living a skillfully led life, hammering, is a skillfully led life, and technology replacing that makes art impossible, because there is no skillfully lived life anymore. And that's why Heidegger is so important, because he says that man is most of all skillfully leading, his life, and that is essential. What is, to being a man. The life of technology is something that, is basically the destruction of man, become the one, as I understand. And that, as I see in my mind, reflects back to the art. So that's has relevance also for art. Or am I misinterpreting right now?
Well, I guess I wouldn't be that short-minded and would say like the art and some music made by phone isn't art. I guess it's also about the feeling and emotion and what you connect with the thing you have. Some kind of, people can be a genius and can make some art with this. It doesn't matter, the device better than maybe, the Beethoven. So, for all we know, there are so many possibilities and the world is open to express these possibilities people and students have. And I guess once I heard the joke that, art is that what that critics say art is, so
Or
that's
artists say art.
Yeah,
that's
how we defined art.
Yes.
That was our first definition, and then it went on into Heidegger, and then it became so clear that art is not just defined by the special professionals who hang their paintings in selected places.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we identify, art. So kind of
Yeah.
that art is something more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, especially nowadays, contemporary art is so mixed up. You go to the contemporary art museum, you see TV, and there are like some performances there, and sometimes you sit like on the chair in front of TV and you try to think, is this art? Probably not necessarily, but since it's in the place called the art museum, then it becomes the thing that there is. Because personally, again, when I go to the contemporary art museums, there I see like so many weird things today nowadays. What the piece of the newspaper or something, it's called art, though it doesn't probably mean anything. If there is some explanation, it can connect me some message, but not necessarily again. Yeah, I guess nowadays the concept of art has just became so wide, anything has become art. Yeah. Reflection or suggestions?
I mean, if art is only the thing defined by professionals,
Mm-hmm.
and spaces, like this gallery, how is Heidegger relevant to art? It seems like to me you try to put together art and Heidegger.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Heidegger, most importantly, as is also in his videos, was about the skillful living of life. There you seem to be like more about the traditional way of being.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the only way you are skillfully living a life. As of now, I can go home and start to hammer the roof. It's a skillful way of being.
Mm-hmm.
How is that reflected, connected to art? That seems to be when you connect Heidegger, and somehow you were also talking about poetically being in the world.
Yeah, but it's basically some kind of authentic activity where you engage with like total focus, and you conceive something for yourself and to others.
I had something in your this question slide. Can we go back?
Sure.
I don't remember this very well, but
here.
for example, this second question, what do you think?
Yeah, it's very ambiguous.
Because it is so large, this question is so large, and it is not meaningless, but I think it is it's a question about tools. Tool in hand of artist can be tool, but tool in hand of not artist is not something other. So I think it is question about artist more, not about tools. Or understand I right or not?
Well, I guess this is the question for the whole unfold, Probably if you would have made some survey on the streets with some respondents and some young people, especially youth, would say that, yeah, of course, all these gadgets, makes us feel good, and we can make art with our phones and put very nice pictures of some beach or the Pärnu street Facebook, I get some likes, and that's this, I become some kind of star of among my friends. Or if we talk about the fine arts, many hands and, you know, not that publicly, let's say, not so many people visit galleries today. And
but it is question of art, or it is question of art forms? Because I think when some iPhone is in hand of very professional photographer or video maker or filmmaker, I think it is also possible to make very professional pictures and videos with this tool. It is not a question of tool, I think.
Yeah, it's about being professional, skillful mastery of the tool. So if
I am also all the time thinking about this electronic technology in music, for example, and in connection, for example, in Johann Sebastian Bach. I personally think that when Bach has this kind of tools, Bach was high-level electronic music composer today. With this tool, because Bach was very progressive and very in very last level in this time. So
yeah, I guess it depends on the tools you have and what the possibilities these tools provide you with.
I guess your claim is more like that you know, these devices, computers, smartphones, and you know, that they're somehow bad or just make skill irrelevant, somehow are, you know, like destroying the skillfulness of being in the world, as Heidegger would say. That is your problem with it.
Yeah, and some kind of passivity that is caused by these gadgets and all this, internet technology and social networks and all this.
So we would say that, I mean, now we don't navigate anymore by map, we just have the device, and that is destroying the skill of navigating. But the skill itself is like, when Heidegger would say, is like being what it is to be a human being. It's a skill, and that's it, you know. And then the social aspect as well, and I mean, these technologies could destroy our mastership. So by mastership, then, you know, our humanity is gone. Because humanity isn't anything more than foreign. Well, there is reflection, of course.
Exactly. You can be anybody, anything. You know, you get then can be a cook and the motorbike professional driver, surfer, whatever.
That's the word.
Yeah.
But if you have a smartphone and you're